So everybody, please put your hands together for the one, the only Ludivine Wouters. Thank you very much, Ludivine.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for this kind introduction. Thank you to all of the panelists for being here, and to all of the participants who are going to, I'm sure, have lots of interesting insights to also share with us via the questions and comments today. I thought it would be really good, as you were saying, to start by taking a quick look back over the last couple of years, what responsible raw materials has already achieved and how it's grown quite organically. And also to, put out some sneak peeks at what we are planning for the future. There's really some interesting dimensions to explore, and hopefully everybody online today will have some contributions or ideas or comments that will help us along. As you mentioned, this really started in 2020, and I want to take my hat off once again to Sarah Gordon and Rose Clark, who in the middle of the first or the second lockdown, depending on where you were, whilst all of us were reeling from the stress of trying to reorganize our businesses, our lives, or everything, decided to start this conference as really a very open model of roundtables. And that's quite a unique element in how responsible raw materials has been shaped and continues to be shaped. And two things I wanted to point out, which have been intrinsic to responsible raw materials since the very beginning. The first one was clearly a very open thought process about rethinking mining and minerals with a sustainability lens, and putting these ideas more into practice than into statements. The second aspect that I think was key right from the beginning is the fact that sharing experiences, sharing learnings, sharing different perspectives has always been key to the responsible raw materials approach. And so the structuring of the library of recordings, which you alluded to earlier, is a core element to how responsible raw materials has evolved. You mentioned, of course, already one striking achievement, which was the collaboration with CRISCO members on the evolution of the mineral reporting codes. The fact that we are now taking ESG and sustainability considerations from, I would almost say, ancillary to the very core of how mining and minerals defines itself, because that is the goal of these reporting codes, is to set the line of how we portray these resources to the world. That is a significant evolution, and I'm glad to say that responsible raw materials played an intrinsic part in creating that coordination and that dialogue. 2021, a second conference, building on the initial success. There's already been a lot of positive outcomes, and I think what's interesting is that in 2021 we really took things up another level and started to focus on all of these linkages, which make these problems extremely complex, but also require solutions that simply cannot live in silos. And the 2021 conference was really about exploring those linkages, exploring those connections, and increasingly looking, as I said again, for the practical approaches which then can make systemic change. And of course, that brings us to today. Sarah has explained a lot of the approach that this conference will focus on. I think what's interesting is that looking at ESG as sort of inwards looking parameters, the very next step is to think about, okay, well, what's the purpose of ESG? ESG serves no purpose if it is not linked to a real consideration of external and systemic stakes around sustainability. And I think where we are today is quite an interesting and important moment, and a lot of the other speakers will pick up on aspects of this. So I thought I would just put a lot of these, issues on that slide right here. The first thing that I think is clear to a lot of people is that the resources sector is uniquely exposed to multifaceted risks. There's a lot of economic, political, cultural contexts that have to be considered because of the nature and locations of mining worldwide. And yet, as we're transitioning from economies where really fossil fuels were the backbone of energy needs over to more, hopefully, greener and more sustainable energy options, minerals have a key role to play in enabling this transition. What's interesting is that across the board, this role is being understood in parallel with the requirement for mining and minerals to themselves be more responsible. So criticality and responsibility are intrinsically linked in all of the policy and approaches right now. You can see that in the US critical minerals agenda, the EU Green Deal, and critical minerals initiatives. Very clearly, it's understood that there's a paradox between the urgent need for strategic minerals and at the same time, the need to ensure that mining itself enables positive impact and addresses development challenges. And that's why also I think it's important to remember that we are facing global stakes in terms of the climate, in terms of inequalities, in terms of risks that are now affecting every single one of us. And that mining has, again, and perhaps more than ever, an important position in these stakes. Criticality means that all of a sudden, not just the production of minerals, but their processing have become key to a lot of industrialization policy and frankly, to a lot of geostrategic positioning, including, very competitive positioning. And I think the other thing that's striking today is the fact that we have both systemic and local issues and that they're completely linked. And that means that there are both systemic and local solutions. And that in order to make sense, they really need to work together. So in many ways, as we're pushing for more supply chain transparency and accountability, responsible practices from mining to export to processing of materials are coming to the forefront of a lot of people's concerns. So there's also an issue of the misperceptions around mining and the fact there is a social rejection of mining. And the last point that I wanted to highlight is the equity, diversity, and inclusion issue. We all picked up on things like the Responsible Mineral Index report, which flags gender as a major failing across the industry. The Rio Tinto report on workplace culture in February 2022, again, highlighted a lot of structural issues, which are not specific to Rio Tinto. The fact is, when you look at EDI and sustainability in mining, it's both a question of values and ultimately of value. This industry has increasing workforce challenges. And if we don't address all of these issues simultaneously, one of the impacts will be that we simply will not be able to deliver the minerals that are needed for this green transition. So the stakes are high, and I think mining is under a huge amount of pressure to deliver on those. And as Andy pointed out, it does mean that we need to reinvent ourselves. And I think that's what's most interesting about responsible raw materials and the direction we're hoping to take in the next year or so. as I said, criticality and responsibility are intrinsically linked. They are part of the same issue. The drivers behind these expectations and requirements can vary in terms of, geographies or the various disciplines that are looking at them, or, which part of the sector you're coming from. But the reality is they are now pervasive across the supply chain. So what can responsible materials bring to the table? And that's what I wanted to sort of spotlight here in the middle. The first thing that is a strength of this forum is the fact that it has created a colossal network of professionals, experts, practitioners, decision makers, advisors across every discipline, geography, or aspect of the sector. So we can tap on a colossal amount of shared knowledge. The three most, I would say, relevant contributions that responsible raw materials can make are the capacity to convene this open dialogue, which is rare. There are any number of multi-stakeholder initiatives right now focusing on these issues. But the capacity to span every single aspect of mining, from ASM with somebody like Estelle, reminding us of that context, all the way to the investors, the insurers, the financiers, the NGOs, the regulators, all of these people can be around this table. And so convening that dialogue is a key element of what responsible raw materials can contribute. Of that dialogue, there is an incredible amount of shared knowledge that emerges. Hence the reference to, the information hub that we were discussing, but also increasingly to analysis and research capacity. And that, I think, will be a big part of the future for responsible raw materials, because we've now amassed a lot of information. There are specific themes where this information can be applied for greater effect. And fundamentally, this all feeds into, I think, significant capacity for advocacy. There is a need for informed and independent, but also collaborative approaches to addressing the issues we face within the mining sector, and the mining sector as an enabler of solutions for the wider economy and society. So a big part of where we hope to go in the next few months is to structure positions on some of the key values that we've defined together over these roundtables, and use these to really become that independent and informed voice, with the benefit of perhaps not consensus, but at least consolidated proposals, which can build on that immense diversity of perspectives that we can bring together. So what's in the next 12 months? The first thing is, of course, structuring and ramping up. We're in the process of incorporating responsible raw materials as a not-for-profit entity in the UK, building a lot of consultation and engagement with the community around some of these ideas, and then effectively honing in on a few key initiatives, for example, like the work you did on the responsible reserves, to really drive clear outcomes, which are going to focus on, frankly, these 3 points, because they're at the heart of what's being done here. So I think these are the grounds for a lot of constructive growth from responsible raw materials. We will be in touch all the time over the next few months as we progress with all of this structure. And of course, we would like to hear as much as possible from all of you, and look forward to your feedback.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Ludivine. Massive round of applause from all of us on the other side of these two-dimensional screens that we have here. As you can see, so Ludivine's given a very professional overview with regards to who responsible raw materials are and what we exist for. during the course of this week, obviously, our minds, our arms are, of course, welcome to absolutely everybody in terms of your perspectives and your contributions. As Ludivine's already alluded to, there's a whole load of material there on the website, all of which can be added to. So, for example, if you think that we're missing something, and also if you think that we're deluded, then tell us. We want to hear all of this, and we want to hear your perspectives and how we can generally ensure that the provision of raw materials to the wider world, where of course those raw materials are needed, is undertaken in the most responsible way possible. Now,